2005, an arrangement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States was made. This arrangement, unannounced to the public, unregulated by Congress, merges the United States, Mexico, and Canada into one entity, erasing all borders. It's called the North American Union, and you might want to ask yourself why you've never heard of this. In fact, there is only one mainstream reporter who has actually heard of and has had the courage to cover this issue.
The Bush administration's open borders policy and its decision to ignore the enforcement of this country's immigration laws is part of a broader agenda. President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it, and he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States.
It's a deal that few have even heard of.
It's being done again by very few people at the very top on behalf of the investment class, but the working class of people, political officials across our country, from communities, from cities and so forth, they don't know anything about this.
This isn't some trade agreement. It is a total removal of sovereignty from these countries, which will also result in a completely new currency called the Amero.
Fall. Apart from that, I think one thing people who are dollar-based need to focus on is the Amero. That's the one thing that nobody's talking about that I think is going to have a big impact on everybody's life in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. The Amero is the proposed new currency for the North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to make a borderless community, much like the EU, and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
By default of this agreement, the American Constitution will eventually be obsolete. You would think that a situation like this would be on the cover of every major newspaper. That is until you realize that the people who are behind this movement are the same people behind the mainstream media, and you are not told what you're not supposed to know. The North American Union is the same concept as the European Union, the African Union, and the soon-to-be Asian Union, and the same people are behind all of them. And, when the time is right, the North American Union, the European Union, the African Union, and the Asian Union will be merged together, forming the final stages of a plan these men have been working on for over 60 years. A one-world government.
I don't want to believe it, and that's probably what holds me back on it, but I'm certainly seeing enough indication that it could be true. Absolutely, because they're always talking about Mexico and the United States and Canada ending up like Europe. And there's things done politically that seem to take us in that direction.
Acordamos un plan de trabajo para la competitividad. También acordamos desarrollar un plan de transporte de América del Norte que en pocas palabras significa asegurar una mejor infraestructura de los tres países para potenciar, para incrementar el comercio que hacemos entre las tres naciones. En este alcance también acordamos simplificar y armonizar los procedimientos y requisitos aduaneros. También acordamos facilitar el tránsito de personas. Acordamos también impulsar el desarrollo sustentable, combatiendo y trabajando en la mitigación del cambio climático. También reafirmamos nuestro compromiso para apoyar y cooperar con la región centroamericana y del Caribe, que son socios en el hemisferio, para promover su desarrollo, su crecimiento económico y la seguridad ciudadana.
The Bilderberg Group constructed the European Union by stealth under the guise of trade deals. Now the elite are using the same secretive program to complete the North American Union. But this time, superstate integration is on the extreme fast track. International agreements like NAFTA, GATT, and APEC were just stepping stones in the formation of the NAU. The North American Union was officially born at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, on March 23, 2005. The leaders of the United States, Mexico, and Canada told the press that they were only meeting to discuss trade. It soon leaked that a secret meeting had been held during the Security and Prosperity Trilateral Summit. The three governments had refused to release the secret agreement to the people. In September of 2006, their treasonous operation was blown wide open. From September 12th to September 14th, in Banff, Canada, hundreds of elected and appointed government leaders from Canada, Mexico, and the United States met in secret. On the last day of the conference, someone inside the secret North American Union Forum leaked the agenda. The front pages of newspapers across Canada carried the story. The Judicial Watch Foundation submitted Freedom of Information Act requests to obtain the full agenda and minutes of the secret assembly. Many federal agencies refused, citing national security. The foundation finally succeeded and did receive thousands of pages of documents. The documents marked unclassified are the blueprints of a shadow government ruling by bureaucratic and executive fiat. The pages chronicle an already operating North American Union. Transportation, law enforcement, agriculture, regulation, banking, manufacturing, construction, education, immigration, and even the military are being merged with no input from the people or their elected representatives in Congress and Parliament. One of the first items on their agenda was to stress how important it was that their plan, quote, be carried out by stealth. The controllers also talked about exploiting the public's fears of climate change to push a continent-wide tax to fund the new government. Globalist tool Robert Pastor is incessantly paraded on the world stage as the man behind the North American merger. When he testified before Congress, he pushed the idea of a continental security perimeter that erases national boundaries and merges the security apparatus.
The best way to secure the United States today is not at our two borders with Mexico and Canada, but at the borders of North America as a whole.
In fact, the North American Command, based in Colorado Springs, Colorado, was clearly running the meeting in Canada. For the past decade, the Pentagon has been training with Mexican and Canadian forces and has openly discussed using them inside the United States for disasters and to quell domestic unrest. There are already over 100,000 non-U.S. citizens serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. The Pentagon is now expanding its recruiting centers in Mexico, the Philippines, and Eastern Europe. Big city police departments nationwide are lobbying to change laws so they can recruit non-citizens to join the police force. What we are witnessing is a Red Dawn scenario in slow motion. Tyrants throughout history have brought in foreigners to oppress their domestic populations. When their coup by stealth was exposed, the three governments went into damage control mode. The Security and Prosperity Partnership quickly staged a show summit that was held in Ottawa, Canada in February of 2007.
It is the only way that we can achieve security and prosperity for our people is through this cooperation. We actually occupy one physical space, the North America. We've also had a chance as foreign ministers to talk about how we cooperate in the region and indeed in the world.
Protesters who were upset about losing their countries and freedoms were not tolerated.
A couple of weeks ago, an Al-Qaeda supposed...
Whatsoever, the Security and Prosperity Partnership has been signed without any sort of parliamentary debate.
Globalist publications have been open with their frustration that the population has not bought their latest PR stunt. As integration inside the European and American unions accelerates, the superstates themselves are being merged. On April 30th, 2007, a summit was held at the White House. The Security and Prosperity Partnership's secretive approach had alarmed the public. So this time, President Bush, German Chancellor Merkel, and EU Commission President Barroso hid their treachery in plain sight.
Thank the Chancellor and Josie very much for the transatlantic economic integration plan.
And for that too, we need to develop a common market, common standards.
So this is indeed a very important agreement, and an agreement that also brings with it a transatlantic economic council to be a permanent body with senior people on both sides of the Atlantic that will look at all those issues in a concrete manner, in which way we can make it move forward.
The BBC reported that the US and EU had agreed on a single market. By announcing a new economic community integration, they were simply repeating what had been done in America and the EU on a larger scale. The accord states that the two blocs will aggressively push regulatory convergence in more than 35 areas, from financial services, intellectual property, military, education, mergers and acquisitions. They also agreed to jointly push a global carbon tax.
We recognize that we have a problem with greenhouse gases.
We agree there is a global threat, it's a serious threat. We agree there is the need to establish a limit to greenhouse gases.
We need to discuss the possible pricing of CO2. How can we translate this into a market economic compatible scheme?
We have agreed to establish a high-level group, a forum.
This EU-US result is translated into the G8, debated together with the outreach countries, China, South Africa, Brazil, among others, and India.
A global solution to a global problem.
If Bilderberg succeeds, America falls. All the victimized countries lose their sovereignty.
Bilderberg is not a person, it's not an idea, it's an ideal, a very powerful group of people working together and from the positions of ultimate and absolute power, destroying every constitution on earth, no matter how powerful the constitution of the nation is. That's what these people do.
The African Union arose out of the African Economic Community, set up in the early 1980s. The African Union is financed by a consortium of international bodies, governments, and corporations. The African Union Army serves as an enforcement arm for the New World Order's exploitation of Africa. In Asia, APEC and ASEAN have announced plans to form the Asian Union, consisting of Asian and Pacific nations, having more than 3 billion people within its borders.
APEC will become the Asian Pacific Union, and the world is to be divided into 3 great regions for the administrative convenience of the world government in which the UN is to evolve.
So one area of this structure that they want is breaking countries up into regions. And this is one of the maps for how they intend to break up European Union, into regions. And what they have planned is that regions of one country are connected into regions in another, therefore destroying national sovereignty and national unity, because they want an end to sovereignty. They want an end to all of it. They just want technocrats, bureaucrats, and uniform impositions of the decisions made by those people, and no democratic things at all. Now, this is something called America 2050. This is all connected into the agenda for Agenda 21, and they have broken up America into a series of mega regions in which they will have mega cities, what they call human settlement zones, which I'll get to.
As the unions form individually, they are simultaneously merged to form the first planetary government.
They're trying to destroy every nation on earth which is trying to promote progress, because these people basically they are landowners. They don't need progress because they control the land. If you take the most powerful man in London, the people who belong to the Council and the Committee of 300, who belong to the Bilderbergers, the British royalty, the Guelphs, the black nobility of Venice and Genoa, these people, they're landowners. The New World Order is the Old World Order. I mean, it's just the names have changed, the appearances have changed, but the concept hasn't changed. The idea is still to bring the men back, kicking and screaming back to the Middle Ages, post-industrial age world order.
One of the things that is very shocking to most Americans is the fact that the United Nations Global Biodiversity Assessment, which came out in 1995, clearly shows that in order to protect planet Earth, we have to go back to a feudal system. They actually said that in the document.
To craft a modern feudal society, the globalists are implementing a standardized North American Union ID card to track, trace, and control their serfs as they travel throughout the 3 regions of the NAU. Building on the massive displacement of humanity caused by globalization, the New World Order is rapidly constructing the physical infrastructure of the North American Union, the NAFTA Superhighway Control Grid.
I'm Arthur Peterson, Colonel retired in the Army. I see things today that are happening that would make my friend who died in World War II turn over in their grave. To think that people would even consider confiscating land of farmers and ranchers and taking their homes away from them to turn it over to a foreign company in Spain, which was controlled by Don Carlos, I understand, a notorious socialist, and they get the tolls on Texas land for 50 years.
The proposed Trans-Texas corridor would be a patchwork of superhighways and railroads stretching 4,000 miles from the border of Mexico, cutting through Texas to Oklahoma. A lease has been signed that would make Texas Highway 121 a toll road. A private Spanish company won the bid to build and collect the tolls for the next 50 years. These deals with private companies are being negotiated largely in secret, and many state lawmakers are worried taxpayers are being sold down the road.
Critics say it's a threat to our national security. It's part of a plan for a North American integration being carried out by government and corporate elites without congressional or voter approval.
More than 80 federal and state highways have been designated as international arteries. The I-35 NAFTA corridor starts deep inside Mexico and travels through the middle of the United States and ends in central Canada. Container ships from Asia dump their cargo on the Pacific side of Mexico. It then travels duty-free by rail to the new Kansas City inland port, now considered sovereign soil of Mexico, in the heart of the United States. Under international agreements, predominantly foreign companies are placing tolls on already existing paid-for roads. Federal, state, and corporate documents show that they will then use the revenue raised to build up the transportation infrastructure of Mexico, not the United States or Canada, so foreign-made products can pour in even faster from Mexico. Revenues raised will also be used to fund the fledgling North American Union and its growing bureaucracy. Bottom line, they're using our own money to enslave us. Just Phase 1 alone of the state toll road plan is estimated to raise more than $200 billion in just the first 15 years. And Texas is only a small part of the global panorama. A combine of transnational companies is aggressively consolidating public finance infrastructure worldwide. And the same interests are erecting a world government according to their rules. A literal wonderland of corporate corruption, where governments simply act as vacuum cleaners, sucking up the wealth and resources of the middle class and transferring it to offshore bank accounts, leaving behind a cultural and economic wasteland of easily managed slaves.
The whole purpose about the North American Free Trade Agreement is not about trade, it's about control. Control of people. CAFTA is even worse. Control of people. It's not about trade, it's subsidized trade with taxpayers' funds.
This thing started here. And to save this country, we kill this damn thing here.
To stop it here in Texas, we stop the New World Order right here in Texas.
Polls consistently show that over 90% of the people are against the NAFTA highway systems and its toll roads. As the people learned of the threat, they got angry and took action.
Our ranch is part of the original Spanish land grant, and I would love to not have to give it back to Spain.
Opponents of a proposed superhighway today held a major protest.
A majority of Texas counties have voted to resist the plan for a North American Union and have vowed to block the construction of its infrastructure.
Heck, we already know in a law that was passed by a subservient United States Congress, where practically nobody in the entire Congress stood up and said, no, they've already passed a law saying all their driver's licenses are going to be chipped. Well, I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to carry in a driver's license that's got a chip in it so Big Brother can watch everywhere I go and see everything I do. No, no, hell no. No, all of it. No, no. We, the people, own this plot of ground. We, the people, own those trees there. We, the people, own our beautiful Texas, and we are not going to let a bunch of crooks and robber barons take our beautiful Texas away from us. Hell no! Hell no! No, no, no!
Part of this Agenda 21 is for an enormous cull of the global population. And I'm not kidding when I say cull. I'm talking coming down to 1 billion or half a billion in a world now of more than 7 billion. In 1979, these appeared in Georgia. They're called America's Stonehenge, the Georgia Guidestones, they call them. No one can put their finger on where they came from, who was behind them, and all the rest of it. They're aligned, astrologically aligned, and there's writing of them, written in stone and all that stuff, in different modern languages and some ancient languages, I think including Babylonian. And they call for the population of humanity to be maintained under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. A draft copy of the United Nations Global Biodiversity Assessment calls for the world population to be reduced to some 1 billion, and Nick Rockefeller told Aaron Russo when that conversation took place that the population was going to be reduced by at least half. Whichever it is, there are massive reductions in population. And this guy, Gates and his missus, through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, are absolutely bloody obsessed, Bono's mates, with what they call population reduction. And if anyone thinks that, this is an exaggeration involving reduction in population, this is a map of America under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, the Wildlands Project, and it is America that they want to see under Agenda 21. If you can't read the words, I'll tell you this. The red bits are for little to no human use. The yellow bits are for highly regulated use. The only bits for normal use are these bits here and there that are in green. And they have to therefore clear the land to bring this about. And that's what they are doing, which explains so much that is going on that people don't say, why are they doing this? I'll tell you why they're doing this. Agenda 21, get them off the land. There's now a rural White House Rural Council, which has all the government agencies, including the Department of Defense, to help rural communities. No, it is to rid rural communities of people under Agenda 21 and under eco-fascism. One of the things they're doing is creating more and more and more environmental regulations to make it impossible for small farmers and small growers and small landowners to survive in the rural communities. And therefore, they're destroying the rural communities to get them off the land. They're sending in these SWAT teams, bloody Keystone bloody cops, to treat decent people trying to grow organic and raw milk, produce raw milk. They're treating them appallingly, brutally, horrifically. And they are designed to get people off the land.
RFID tracker chips embedded in state inspection stickers and toll tags are already being used to track the population. The new system is also meant to control growth and steer development through so-called smart growth.
Smart growth, which is nothing more than an effort to bring control into the cities. You have the rewilding of America in the Wildlands Project, the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is to control our rural population.
Toll roads on interstate highways nationwide are walling off exit ramps to small towns and rural communities, and are creating ghost towns by design. This trend is accelerating under the NAFTA highway system and is meant to rewild more than half the country.
All of these things are designed to bring more and more control to bureaucracies rather than to the independent individual, the sovereign individual of this nation. What brought me into this whole discussion was the fact that while I was doing this multi-million-dollar research effort in the 1980s and early 1990s, I became aware of an agenda basically to lock up one half of the United States into wilderness corridors and reserves. What's called the Wildlands Project, but it was also a key cornerstone of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. It was during that study in which I began to realize that this was not an effort to protect the environment, but an effort to control you and I. They were dividing the United States up into little compartments in which they would rip out roads, which they would rip out whole communities and put them back in the wilderness.
The federal highway system was designed by Pentagon war planners in the 1950s to serve as a rapid deployment conduit to move ground forces for the defense of the United States during invasion. The unconstitutional Northern Command is now using the highway system as a force projection matrix to dominate populations across the United States. Through federally funded emergency command centers, county and city governments are being quietly federalized nationwide. Billions of dollars per city is being spent to install millions of surveillance cameras. Every town and hamlet, no matter how small or remote, is surveilled. License plate reading software tracks Americans' movements wherever they go. New systems are being deployed that scan your face, read your lips, and analyze your walk. Under the Treasonous Military Commissions Act, American citizens can be secretly arrested, stripped of citizenship, flown to offshore torture camps, and secretly executed. Under Section 802 of the Patriot Act, all misdemeanors are considered terror.